Hello, everyone. It is Irene Line, and I've got one of my students here today, Selden. Hi, Selden.
Hello.
Selden and I did a chat maybe a year or two ago. I can't remember,
Gosh, I think it's 2 years now.
where we
Yeah.
talked about your journey healing lupus and chronic illness and autoimmune. Um, we'll let that be there. So if people want to hear your full story on healing, lupus,
Hmm.
autoimmune, and maybe we'll just do a quick update before we get started, they can watch that.
Yeah. Okay.
But today we're talking about topics that one might say are loaded in concept, things
Mm.
like ADD, medication for these things. I'm going to be really general things. What
Hmm.
neurodivergence? What is that?
Hmm.
Is it a thing? And your story, your
Yeah.
experience healing this stuff, your experience with medications,
Hmm.
drugs, all the things that you did
Yeah.
and you've been open about. So we're going to talk about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
There's a
know
lot.
you and I we're very we're smiling because it's a topic we love.
Yeah. It
But
is a
let's
topic
start.
I love.
Yeah, let's start. Just give people, your full name, what you do, and
Okay.
the quick version. In Canada, we call it Cole's Notes, but I think in America it's Cliff Notes.
Yeah. I know Cole's notes too. Either way.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah. So my name is Selden Beylouni. I am a somatic coach and quantum healer. So because of Irene, thank you so much for introducing me to this amazing work of somatics. I integrate that into my coaching sessions now.
Mhm.
But I am very much a holistic healer, and work in the quantum field in terms of energy and intuition and building intuition and things. And um, yeah, I mean, I came into this world of holistic healing because I suffered from, many physical symptoms, chronic illnesses from a very young age. And so this topic today, attention deficit disorder specifically for me, I mean, that became a diagnosis for me at the age of 13. I I got into my brother's Ritalin stash
Oh my
and
goodness.
took his Ritalin when I was 13. So I guess I was like eighth or ninth grade,
Mhm.
I think. And I was like, let me back up a little bit.
Yeah,
Before that, I was having a lot of trouble in school. I had a
yeah.
very hard time, not just concentrating, I had a hard time comprehending.
Mhm.
And I really had a hard time since the age of like 5. And this will be a little bit of repeat of what I talked about in the other video. But at the age of 5, I started like dissociating.
Mhm.
And I think because I was so young, that became my personality, right? That's how people viewed me, was spacey and airheady. And, oh, she's always daydreaming and she's always kind of in the clouds. And that became like I thought that I thought that's who I was.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting because now I don't think anyone would describe me as that. You know what I mean? So that's that. But fast as I'm, progressing into childhood and in school and all of these things, I had a very hard time in school. I had a hard time, understanding what I was reading. I honestly am not sure how I wasn't in like special classes. I really don't even know how I passed because I don't even remember a lot of what I learned in school. Now that I'm reviewing some things with my kids, I'm like, God, you guys, I don't know. I'm like, I don't know how to, do you know what I mean? I'm like, I don't even think I just didn't absorb.
Yeah.
So fast forward, so that was obviously like very traumatic. It was like a traumatic educational experience for me
Mhm.
because I didn't understand what my peers were understanding. I
No.
then kind of separated myself, like I'm weird and I have to like really mask, right? So I got really good at like masking. And if I would ever ask a question, I mean, I learned real quick not to ask questions in school because I was laughed at and I was made fun of because I just didn't understand what was happening.
Mhm.
So then bring me to the point where my brother was diagnosed with ADD. Now he had ADHD, so his was very obvious, and this is the early 90s. And so the boys with that hyperactive stuff, it was like, again, it was like very in our faces, like it was, more obvious. But the girls generally had the more, I'll say, freezy stuff, the more parasympathetic, that high tone dorsal, and for me especially, that daze, that just like not,
Yeah.
just not dissociated, frozen.
Yeah.
And it was just missed. And again, I was just labeled as kind of ditzy. And that's
Mm-hmm.
how people thought I was.
Mm-hmm.
So my parents didn't go and get me tested for anything. They just thought that's who I was because it had been happening for so long.
Mm-hmm.
And they teased me, right? They thought it was funny, right?
Your
And
parents
all of
did.
this is, yeah, oh yeah. And
Yeah.
my dad and my brother, my mom just kind of, and I don't want to like, trying not to like say bad things. They were a product of their own environment. I don't like to like, I don't want to be here shaming them, obviously.
No.
They didn't understand the impact of what they were doing, but obviously this was having a big impact on me at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So at 13, I got into my brother's Ritalin stash, and I was like, I'm so curious about this. He's taking it. Supposedly it's helping him. I've heard that it can help any attention deficit. Like it doesn't have to be hyperactive, because I knew I wasn't like him, but I was like, I wonder if it can help. So
Mm-hmm.
I took one and I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, is this how everybody is like? Like
Yeah.
this is what, because it was like everything opened up.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, what I know now about what happened was like I was hit with a big old dose of adrenaline and
Yeah.
dopamine.
Yeah.
I felt really
Neurotransmitters.
good. I
Mm-hmm.
was alert and
Mm-hmm.
I was able to concentrate. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if you were to ask, did it work? And yeah, hell yeah, it worked. It like
Mm-hmm.
definitely, you know, it did like give me an opportunity to have a different experience in my learning, my learning years, those years. So I tell my mom, actually, like, hey, listen, I took John's Ritalin and it was really working for me. And I think that I need to get tested. Now, back then in the early 90s, you actually went for like a 5-day test. You didn't just go to a psychiatrist and say, I can't concentrate, and they gave you a prescription, which I
Right.
think is kind of what's happening now.
Yeah.
You had to she sat me down and I did this like, it was like an hour long. I want to say we went before school, and it was like 4 or 5 days.
Wow.
And it was like a written test of some sort. I can't even tell you what was all on it. And what's interesting is my mom had started giving me coffee in the morning, again, to function. I was like having a hard time in these years, even
Mm.
getting out of bed and functioning, because that's how much
Right.
freeze was on my
Yeah.
system. And about halfway on like the third day of that test, I said, oh, well, I didn't have my coffee this morning. And she goes, wait a second, have you been taking coffee before you've been taking this test? I said, yeah. And she goes, okay, well, the test has been skewed then. You know what I mean? So she diagnoses me. I finished those last few days, with no coffee. And me and my mom were like, we didn't know, we didn't know that's basically the same thing as like, taking a stimulant as these drugs were. So she diagnoses me and I start, my stimulant, my long relationship, I'll call it a relationship with stimulant medications.
Yeah.
And it started with Ritalin and quickly increased. And then I think, well, I don't think I know, because of all of the things that kind of led up to this, this point in my life, I went down the road of exploring other drugs,
Mm-hmm.
drinking. I think I had already been dabbling with psychedelics and marijuana and
Mm-hmm.
alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
And then Ritalin kind of added this other thing of like, oh, like maybe this is like, maybe I need to venture out into even more street drugs that are in
Right.
this category. Like, because I mean, really, I was self-medicating very much. So then it's like, oh, what more can I do? You know? And again, home life wasn't emotionally safe, you know, for me. And I found a lot of camaraderie in all the kids that were using drugs and going out and
Sure.
partying and, you know, being crazy. And, you know, sort of safety. Like, you know, it's just people that are like you know?
It's
So
very
it's like this
tribal
whole,
that time
it's
of year,
tribal. Yeah,
or time of
totally.
life, right? I'm assuming, is this like grade, we would call it like grade 10, 11, 12, like that
This is
final?
10, 11, 12. I would say 11, 12 really started to get very sticky. I would say
Yeah.
half 10th, last half of 10th grade was when I think got prescribed actually. And then 11th and 12th was like I was in rehab actually the remainder of the last half of my senior year. I had to
Okay.
go to rehab. So yeah, so I started dabbling in crystal meth and cocaine, and I was like, yeah, I'm not wasting my time anymore on marijuana. Like that's not my thing. You know,
That's
this is
too
not
loose.
my thing.
Yeah.
Oh my God. So yeah, so that's why I say I really formed a relationship with this type of drug
Yeah.
because it helped me. I thought it was helping me be who I really was. Like that's the trick it plays on you.
Yeah.
Like, oh, now it's like now I can do all the things I couldn't do before, and it's like helping me be my authentic self. I mean, I didn't have that language back then, but I think that's what I thought was happening.
Mhm.
Um, and it is such a trick because that's not at all what happens. You know,
No.
obviously you get farther and farther away from yourself.
Before we started recording, when we were just talking about what
Mm.
we wanted to talk about today,
Yeah.
and when you were talking about being unable to remember what you learned in school,
Mm.
I am in the exact, like, I mean, other than basics of history,
Yeah.
like I remember the history that I learned in grade 11 and 12, but if you were to ask
Mhm.
me any basics of Canadian history, no, nothing. And
Yeah.
and
Wow.
the school teachers, or what's wrong with Irene? I had to get my ears tested because they thought I was deaf. I was never at that point, there was the gifted kids, and then there was just all the other kids. And so in elementary school, the gifted kids got to use the Commodore 64 computers, which were big at the time. And I remember this. They all would go into the library and get to learn, how to use a computer, and then me and a few others had to stay in the classroom and like conjugate more verbs. I have no idea what we had to do, but that comprehension, it didn't land. Um, and of course, there's lots of things that I think that's from. I think it's not just one thing. I've talked about my early traumas, my chemical trauma, but one of the big things for me when I was 5, and I've talked about this in other videos, I had my tonsils taken out, and I was left at the hospital. And when my parents left, I still remember it. One of my first memories, um, the nurse handled me really poorly, and she, flipped me onto my belly and stabbed me in the butt with a sedative, because that's what you
Mm.
did back then. And I
Yeah.
just remember Selden
Uh,
screaming and screaming and trying to fight. So
yeah,
it was a physical attack,
for sure.
alone. And but that would never have been lodged, because I obviously I'm not going to remember that, because then I go
Yeah,
into anesthesia, I get surgery, and then that gets layered
exactly.
into my somatic memories.
Yeah,
Is that
exactly.
what caused my brain? Who knows, right? But just like you, I couldn't understand things. And just recently, as I've gotten out of freeze, I'm starting to be better at numbers.
Same.
Like,
Yeah.
I hated playing crib with Seth. It's a
Yeah.
card game, because of the
Mm-hmm.
counting. And so
Uh-huh.
we do it, and it's kind of like I have to be somatically tuned in. It's like I feel the bits of anxiety, I feel the tension. And of course, he's like, he doesn't care.
Yeah. Yeah.
But But since getting out of these freezy things, I'm
Uh-huh.
actually getting quicker at counting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did university level calculus with no problem
Wow.
because
And
it's more
functioning.
abstract and it's a bit more
Interesting.
complex. But the basic counting just, what, 7 plus 8? I don't know.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I've always counted on my fingers and I still
Me
do
too.
do that. I
Me
still do
too.
do that. Well, one thing I've noticed is TV shows that I tried to watch a few years ago,
Yeah.
and I gave up on them because I didn't understand this. I couldn't follow the storyline.
Yeah.
I'm revisiting them now, and I'm like, wait, what in the world could I not follow? Like, there's
Oh,
nothing confusing about it. So for
amazing.
me, it's more like dialogue, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like that kind of thing. And words, sometimes just like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Game of Thrones, I was like, I don't know how anybody watches that show. Like, I was like very confused in like just the first few episodes. So I gave up on that. But now I'm kind of like, I think I might want to revisit that, and
You
see.
should. I just finished it. I just finished
You
the whole.
did?
Yes.
Oh my
And
God.
same
Yeah, I'm so
same thing.
curious.
This is so funny. I started
Yeah.
it, and it was more the first episode. Something scared me with the look of these white. They're the White Walkers, and I'm like, I can't watch that. And I have
Oh
no
my.
trouble usually with that kind of like gore and action,
Yeah.
but for whatever reason, I stopped, and Seth was like, "You really should try watching it because it's really good." Like, okay, and so
Yeah.
I actually treated it like um, a
Mm,
project. And when you get
interesting.
into it,
Yeah.
there's like 15 storylines, and
Exactly.
it's a process to remember it. But I was able to, I'd watch it and then I'd check in with him, funnily enough, because he's
Yeah.
watched it 3 times.
Right.
And he knows every
Interesting.
person, and I'm like, okay, so this person, so it was actually my brain got stronger following all those different levels and the connections and
Mhm.
remembering the names. So
Interesting. Yeah, I
you'll have
can
to try and
see
let me
how
know.
that's like, yeah, that's like a mental exercise. And it's
Hmm.
so interesting to me that that's just easy for some people. But now, like for me, it was Vampire Diaries of all things. I would get to season four, halfway through season four, and they started branching off into different storylines. And again, like because people are going to be watching this and be like, "Wait, are you kidding me? She couldn't follow Vampire Diaries." But this time, my daughter wanted to watch it. I had to supervise because it's not
Right,
totally appropriate.
right.
And I was editing scenes and fast forwarding things, and we got to season four, and I was like, past it, and I'm like, she's like, "Didn't you say this was too confusing for you to watch past?" I'm like, "Yeah, I did." And now I watched the whole thing, and there's no part of me thought it was confusing at all. I followed everything. And I was like, wow, that is such a testament to what the rewiring that has happened in my brain, you know?
Let's talk about that.
Yeah,
Let's talk
let's do
about
it.
that because one of the things that we wanted to speak to is this notion that you have this thing, this ADD, this dyslexia, this trouble with math. I recently found out there's an actual word for trouble with math. I think it's like
Oh,
dyscalculia or something like
there
that.
is a word for it. Yeah,
And
because there's
and
dyslexia for words, or they have
yeah,
dyslexia for numbers too,
they
but
do.
I think it's a different word though.
It's
Anyway,
different.
yeah.
And so there's all these things. I was
Mhm.
lucky enough to be brought into the world when these things weren't around. So it was just Irene doesn't get it, which I'm actually grateful for. There was never a label put
Yeah,
on me. My parents, thanks mom
absolutely.
and dad, they never worried when I wasn't getting good grades because they just knew that that wasn't the only thing.
Yeah,
Mainly because I think my father didn't do well in school and my mother came from the Philippines where that just wasn't,
right.
it's like everyone got educated at a very basic, same level there. Um,
Hmm.
so this notion that this is who I am,
Yeah.
this is how I'm always going to be,
Mhm.
versus, wow, I have this thing. Let's see what we can do to not have this and know that by not having it, it doesn't make you less of a cool person or less of a creative.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so, do you want to speak to just that? Because there's
Hmm.
This is a touchy subject. And I also know that you have said that the medications that you've used have helped you get
Yeah,
to
I was thinking
there.
about that today. Yep,
Yeah. So do you want to just
for
riff a
sure.
little bit on this? Because I think
Yeah,
it's a very sticky topic, and yet you're a great example, as am I, that we can get to this point in our life where we're not needing these medications,
absolutely.
but it takes time.
Yeah. So I was walking today, my dog, and I was like thinking about this idea that the medication really helped me. And I thought, for a while, during this work, I've kind of gone back and forth with that idea. And it's like, there's this part of me that feels like, God, thank God I had that. Now, I was not using those street drugs for an extended period of time, but I was on Ritalin at first. Then there was a phase of the street drugs, and then it was Dexedrine. And then when I finally got off of them, that last cycle, I'll call it, was Vyvanse. So I was on a plethora through the years of different medications. And, if I had not had those, potentially I wouldn't have moved to New York, and I wouldn't have had a fabulous career that I loved and met amazing people that I loved doing hair and makeup,
Hmm.
um, and been able to come back here and have my business. I was able to learn once I was on those medications. And
Yeah.
interestingly, in my junior, senior year of high school, I do remember more of the things that I learned in those
Sure.
years when I was on those medications. So, I'm here to say there was a positive aspect of that. But today I
Hmm.
was thinking, like, had I not had it, would I have gone through this whole journey sooner? You
Right.
know, would I have become a healer when I was like 30 rather than 43? Would I
Right.
have, like, we don't know,
We don't
right?
know.
What timeline? So I think it's important to say I don't regret that I had
Yeah.
them,
Yeah.
and interesting to think, what may have happened if I hadn't. And I think, touching on like what you were saying about the diagnoses and the labels,
Hmm.
we we get so identified, we do, like society does, but we also lean into this identification because it helps us feel safe that we're sort of in this group, and this is the explanation for why I have this X, Y, and Z thing that happens. And so that becomes this almost like it's like a allowance, of to just be that way. And I've heard people say to me, "Well, I like my ADD because it helps me be creative."
Right.
What I'll say to that is these people are also medicating themselves. And so, creativity is available to everybody. It's our birthright. It doesn't go away when we heal, right? When we heal dysregulation and some of these parts of us, first of all, we have to let go of the part of us that is identifying as that label
Yeah.
and realize like that isn't the authenticity, right? And the creative, maybe weird or maybe outside of the box thinker part of us, like that's always there. But what
Hmm.
happens is we become masterful at being able to bring and execute our creations out into the world when we are regulated, right? When we are medicated, what happens is we get distracted with mundane projects, side things.
Yeah.
We actually, in a way, interestingly, can become more scattered on those medications, and we become oftentimes hyper focused on something that is not necessarily, I don't know, maybe our life purpose or our life direction.
Hmm.
And with regulation, it's like we have the possibility, like we have the potential to heal those parts of us that like can't keep our home organized or can't keep our environment clean or
Clean.
can't
Yeah.
have connection with our kids or
Hmm.
can't have maintain a job. And then that might be a different thing. Maybe the job that you're in isn't the job you're supposed to be in. I don't
Yeah.
know. Right? And so we heal these aspects of us that hinder us from being able to function well and to have healthy relationships. But that doesn't mean it takes away this other part of us, our creative part. You know what I mean? Again, like creativity is our birthright. We always have that. And so when we start removing these layers that dysregulation kind of brings upon us and kind of hides that authentic part, the creative expression of us and the authenticity part, that actually comes out more, you know? And again, we have the ability to execute it and deliver it to the world in a way that we probably couldn't when we were dysregulated. And that's what I've seen in my own life. And you know, I think it's really interesting because I was just at a friend's house this weekend, and my friend said, he said, I think my father is like sort of on the spectrum. And we were talking about it, and we were talking about some of his symptoms and things that he does and whatever. And I said, oh, so neurodivergent. And everyone goes, oh, I've not heard that term, right? They're not in this like world.
Right.
And they had never heard this term before. And they were like, I like that term because it doesn't make you feel like shameful. It's like it sounds like kind of accepting and all that. And I said, and I just thought to myself, like, I didn't say anything, but I was like, yeah, there's a good aspect to that and like maybe a not so good aspect. Like, are we getting too comfortable with these labels that, you know, it's okay to just not be able to function, right? And I think, again, that connection piece, being able to connect to other people and connect to our kids, you know, that's not just something that we're born with, right? It's a part of us that kind of got separated and, you know, had to start doing that for our own sort of safety and protection and all those things we talk about in this nervous system world. So I think it's sticky territory that we're in right now, you know? And I love that people are waking up to the fact that we can heal these types of things. And I'm also just cautious with those that are saying, oh, I love this part of me, you know?
What you just said there, I want to highlight because this comes back to that self-acceptance, that self-love, which comes from our primary years of life. Did we get it?
Exactly.
Did we not get it? If we didn't get it, we spend our entire lives looking for that acceptance, looking for that understanding. Why am I so different? Why do I struggle? Why am I the black sheep? Why am I picked on? Why am I blah, 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 X, Y, Z, all the things. And so the attractiveness of finding, I don't even know the term, but that even if it's not given to you by a medical diagnosis as you were with the ADD or the ADHD or the chronic illness or the MS or any of the things that people get diagnosed with, if we're not getting that diagnosis, but we know something's not right, and we're still not there yet in finding our full regulation, which I think most, if not all people can get to, but not everybody will. And I've done other videos on why I think not everyone will. They all can, but the question is, will they? You know, everyone deserves to heal. Do you feel it, right?
Yeah.
But there's something comforting about knowing, this explains my struggles. The thing is, and I've been put on the spot with this because I do not love the term neurodivergence.
I know.
It bothers me.
Yeah.
Because it's almost, you know, an excuse for
It's
not.
justified.
It's right. And I've had this viewpoint for years. It's just, we just haven't used that term very much. And often I'll have someone say, Irene, but I'm not sick. I'm like, I never said you were sick. Dysregulation doesn't mean you're sick. I mean, it can lead to that. It's just, it's a part of bloody life right now for most of human society. So there's no shame in being dysregulated. I fully accept my dysregulation when I was highly dysregulated in freeze. And the question is there an interest in coming out of that And maybe, as you said, and this is why I love your story, you used the medication and it helped you get places.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And you realized, and this is what I'd love to know, is when did you have that shift in, I have to shift out of these?
Yeah.
Um, when did that occur and how did that occur?
Yeah, it started happening right before I got pregnant with my daughter, my first
Mhm.
child. And I started going to a homeopath and just started, I really, to be fair, like I was always kind of questioning. I was always kind of questioning my diagnosis,
Right,
questioning why I didn't feel good. I was always questioning why I was ADD when my main symptom was chronic fatigue at the
right,
time. Now, I didn't understand all these other pieces of dissociation and comprehension and all of that. Like, I didn't put all of that together necessarily, which is very interesting because I think that just shows how much freeze was on my system that I
yeah.
didn't actually realize that was happening.
Hmm.
Um, anyway, I started doing the holistic thing, like, taking out gluten, taking out dairy, like playing with some things, going to yoga, religiously,
Yeah,
and trying to kind of like figure out what is it, and venturing outside of the allopathic model for that.
hmm,
And then I got pregnant with my daughter.
right,
And I think I may have said this story in our last chat, but I was like reaching when obviously I got pregnant and I didn't take anything. By the grace of God, I managed to continue working and be pregnant. I literally do not know how I did how I did that. Oh my God. So I have her and I try to stay off the medications, but now I have a newborn. I'm highly dysregulated and I have a business in, a hairstyling business. I have a salon and, 6 or 7 employees at the time.
right.
And I was like, yeah, I'm not going to be able to, able to do this. I think I'm going to go back on my medication. And my husband at the time was like, yeah, I think you should. So I go back briefly, and one day I was holding her in my arms and I was reaching into the medicine cabinet and I was like biting my pill bottle open with my mouth and like trying to get, just like almost this energy of like just desperation.
Manic.
Manic.
Yeah,
Yeah, really.
that's, yeah.
And she was watching me, her little big little eyes. She's just watching me do this whole thing like this. And I looked at her
Wow.
and I was like, am I going to stop right now or am I going to take this one last one? I actually don't even remember what I did. I think I didn't even take it, but that was it. I never took it after that again. And
Mm,
I just, you know, I was going through a spiritual awakening at the time and I just hit a hard, fast break. And I can't say that I would recommend that for everybody. For me, it worked out.
yeah,
Um, but it was really my kids,
yeah,
Yeah, it was my
yeah.
kids. Um, they just helped, they were the catalyst to help me understand like what I'm supposed to be doing here. You know what
Right.
I mean? Really. And I knew it wasn't that, and it always didn't feel great,
Hmm.
and then enter in, intuitive development, and that was kind of the first piece of like, oh wow, it never felt good. And I did it anyway. You know what I mean? I questioned it. It didn't feel great. Yes, I was doing it out of desperation and just being able to function in the world. I have no shame about that.
Mm,
But then it hit a point where it was like, okay, yeah, we're done with this. And I was able to do that. I have a theory that I was able to do that kind of with everything, even alcohol. I'm 5 years sober now, which I'm very proud of.
mhm.
And I do have a theory that I like that was a like a past life potentially, like I don't want to call it trauma pattern that I was able to heal because I did have the ability to kind of like decide when I was done and just do it,
Yeah.
and thank goodness for that. Um, Now, when I got diagnosed with lupus,
Mm-hmm.
and I went on hydroxychloroquine. So
Mm-hmm.
I had been drug allopathy free for
Great.
7 years or something.
Yeah.
And I got diagnosed finally with lupus. And the
Yeah.
doctor was like, I think you should try hydroxychloroquine. And I had been holistic, all the things. I was just introduced to nervous system work.
Right.
And I was like, I can actually take this responsibly. Now, again, it's different than stimulant medications, but it was a resource,
Yeah.
actually, was how I viewed it.
Yeah.
And so I said, I'm going to take it for a year. I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
work on my nervous system. I'm going to be really conscious and intentional with it. And
Yeah.
after a year, I'm going to wean myself off of it. But I want to know what I'm supposed to feel like because I actually don't know. Because
Yeah.
either I was completely shut down or I was really high on
Right.
medications for a
Yeah.
long time. And then when I got off the medications, when I went the holistic route, I was still shut down. I mean, I was still very dysregulated and having a ton of emotional swings, and my energy was all over the place. And yeah, diet and lifestyle and things I was doing were helping, but
Mm-hmm.
nothing like what I was able to do with this
What you are
nervous system
now.
work.
Yeah.
So I made a plan, and I would say, like, anybody who might be listening to this, like, you can do that. Like, you don't have to follow exactly. I mean, I don't want to get in trouble here. I'm just a coach, not a doctor. But you can talk to your doctor about a plan if you want to, even if
Yeah.
it comes to like an Adderall or whatever, and tell your doctor, like, I don't want to take this forever.
Mm-hmm.
How can I wean? And this is titration, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, I work on my nervous system. I use it when I feel like I need to, and maybe that's a resource, and feeling into these different parts. Anyway, it was very successful when I did that with hydroxychloroquine, and
Amazing.
I was able to kind of feel the relief of just the inflammation of my body and the
Yeah.
relief of the pain from my
Yeah.
body
Yeah.
and the relief of the fatigue and the swings. Actually, it really did help a lot, without putting me in so much sympathetic activation, obviously, which is important because it's not a stimulant. And then as I worked on my nervous system, I was able to just sort of take slowly this piece away and then add in more regulation. And that's how I did that. And yeah, did I answer your question? Like, I went,
No, you did. You did. And that's really interesting. And what you said about talk to the doctor,
yeah,
forget that the term titration is super known to them because that's what
right.
they learn in pharmacy.
Oh, yeah,
Titration,
yeah,
right,
yeah,
all that sort of stuff. And so
right.
I would like to think that there are some physicians out there who want their patients to not be medicated to death. Now, of course,
Absolutely.
that's not
Yeah, I
everyone.
mean, I talk about intention. I was intentional with the doctor that I chose as well. So there's
That's
that.
and
I
that's just it.
waited yeah, I waited a year to see her. I saw her because her patients, every review said she listened to me and she believed me. And she had a little bit of a holistic, she's Indian actually, and she
Yeah.
had a mother who never put her on medication. She goes, I've been thinking about going the holistic route for so long. So she was very open and knew my intentions, and that was very helpful. Very helpful.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Your story too, I've shared this in another talk I did with my husband around, because this isn't just for pharmaceuticals that you might ingest for something like lupus or ADD, but I did that with corticosteroids with my skin because I
Yeah.
abused them not knowingly as a young
Right,
person and
exactly.
in my 20s, and then my skin got so bad because I just was like, I can't take this stuff anymore. I'm
Hmm.
pretty sure part of my expression was not only chemical trauma coming out, but some form of topical steroid withdrawal, which, by the way, if you've never seen what that looks like, is horrific. Um,
I think I
and
have. I think I've seen your
it's
pictures.
it's
Yeah.
worse. Like I've seen, I'm like, I wonder what the suicide rate is for topical steroid withdrawal because it is intense. Um, but what I did consciously when it got so bad is I finally went to a dermatologist, kind of begrudgingly, but I'm like, I might not make it if I don't figure this out. And he
Hmm.
suggested one of the strongest topical steroids, but I was intentional, Selden, rather than just slathering it all over my body, which is what
Exactly.
he said.
Yeah.
I used the tiniest little bit on one part of my skin because everything was covered. And then the next morning I woke up and there was like 5% less inflammation
Wow. Yeah,
systemically.
exactly.
I'm like,
Yeah.
okay. And so I did that in a very conscious way. And then when I started doing more specific detox protocols back in 2021, that is when I said, okay, no more. And I
Yeah.
haven't touched, I still have the old bottle in my medicine cabinet as a weird just in case. But I
Yeah.
know I'm never going to use it, but it's just sitting there as a reminder that I used that responsibly for a couple of years to get through the tough time. And then there was a moment where I'm like, not going to use it again.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
I share that just to let people know that this can be done with different types of pharmaceutical aids. It isn't just with prescription meds that you might put in your mouth. I mean, I also had the same problem with overuse of nose sprays when I was a teenager,
I've
like
heard of that. Yeah,
Otriven
I
and
had a
Tristan.
boyfriend. Yeah, exactly.
And it's
And it
that
messed
with
with your whole, yeah,
it's brutal. The
sorry.
withdrawal was, I remember I couldn't breathe for like a month because my
Oh,
nose was just blocked and inflamed.
yeah.
Um, and that, for whatever reason, I remember I was maybe 13, and I remember one morning I'm like, I have to stop using this.
Hmm. Exactly.
So I think for some people, I've heard stories like yours where people just stop and they
Hmm.
can, and then I've had other stories where people try and it doesn't work. And
Yeah.
so everyone, I think, has to find their own unique way if they are looking to get off. Um, because let's face it, there might be a day where the drugstores just close.
Yeah, exactly. That's right.
I'm not saying that that's going to happen, but what if one day it's just not available?
It's not available. Exactly. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I
Oddly, that's
mean,
recently, it's interesting I say that because oddly, where I live right now, our main drugstore, which is all of Western Canada, has been closed for a week due to a cyber attack out of all things.
oh,
And
really?
yeah,
Interesting.
it
Well,
is
in
interesting.
2020, I had a friend who is on, a friend of a friend who is on these medications. This actually, it's interesting that we're bringing this up. She's on Adderall and Ritalin both. It's
Mhm.
crazy. And in 2020, when everything was shut down, she couldn't. There was a shortage. Like she couldn't get it,
Oh,
and
wow.
like for I think a few months.
How did
And
she do? Do you
I
know?
don't remember. I mean, I think she was going through withdrawals. I think she was like frantically trying to find people that she could just buy it off of, and like you go into this desperate,
Desperation.
yeah,
It's
and
like,
like
yeah, it's
you
like with
know,
OxyContin and heroin,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
With that, I mean, it's if you guys haven't watched the series Dope Sick, that goes right
It's
into
so good.
it's
Yeah,
such a it's tough, but it's good, and it
it's
just
really good.
shows that
Yeah.
whole world. But no, you did answer my question.
Okay, good. I'm like, wait, what was the question? That's my ADD. What was the question again?
Yeah. Well, no, I think it's excitement is what it is.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
this transition from making that decision with your daughter, that's such a powerful image with her there, and I can just see it.
So
Um,
sweet, little brown eyes, taking in everything, not knowing what I was doing was there was any wrong thing
no,
wrong or bad. Like she was just, oh, this is I. That's what
it's
hit
not.
me actually. I think subconsciously it hit me like this is her reality. Like, do I want this to be her reality? That like mom's,
Yeah,
taking all these pills? And the answer for me was clearly no.
no.
Um, One other thing I wanted to mention too, just with the ADD, is the overdiagnosis of it that's
Right.
happening. Again,
Yes.
going back to like how I was tested, that I don't think is the case now. And maybe some doctors are still doing that, but I think the majority of them are not. And it's
Mhm.
really getting prescribed heavily out, right? And I think about just the society that we're living in and processed foods, sugar, I mean, certainly with our kids and our, in a, our, I don't want to say inappropriate, what's the word I'm looking for? Or just our lack of relationship with light, right? The sunlight, that
Yes.
circadian piece,
Yeah.
our
Our
inability to
indoor
sleep.
living.
Exactly. Our
Yeah.
scrolling, all this
Yeah.
stuff. And then our lifestyles, especially like we were talking before, as moms. being here, there, scrolling, this, that, like, yeah, we're all gonna kind of feel ADD sometimes,
Mhm.
And one thing that I've really started doing with just my own lifestyle, first of all, my lifestyle is different, now I'm very conscious of the scrolling and my light environment and all of these different pieces.
Mhm.
But with the somatic work, I now have this ability to, like, if I'm working on something on my computer and I see something come up, I can pause and say, okay, well, like, what's the choice? Like, what's the priority? You know what I mean? Okay,
Yeah.
there's always little voices that stay where you are, just stay here. You know what I mean? And I'm like, okay,
Mhm.
stay here. And then I finish, right? Complete task
Yeah.
and then go, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, and that's how I work with these little pieces of still that tendency to just
Of
be
course.
right? And because we're all having that,
Yeah.
and I don't, certainly don't want, you know, who wouldn't? Like, with all the things coming at us, who wouldn't have that tendency to just be over the place? And that doesn't mean somebody's necessarily ADD, and
No.
it does mean we can work with it in
Yeah.
these ways very consciously,
Yeah. Yeah.
and shift
There's a
some of it.
way, totally. There's a way to multitask and be efficient and intentional versus being scattered and doing a
Exactly.
lot but not getting anything done. I remember in my Feldenkrais training, my teacher, because a lot of people think Feldenkrais is all about slow, and you've done
I
Feldenkrais
have,
too,
yeah, I've been
of
going
course,
here.
right?
Yeah.
It's slow, it's intentional, it's soft, but Feldenkrais was a judo master, and there's a lot of lessons where you're doing judo rolls, you're doing fast movements back and forth, back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
But it takes time to get to that because you want
Mm.
the base and the awareness to be there so you don't hurt yourself when you're going quickly.
Yes,
And I
exactly.
remember my main mentor, Jeff, saying one day, there's a difference between hurrying and being fast and efficient
Oh,
and clean, right? Like you can do a lot, but are you still connected in your body and noticing all the elements? And like you said, can you pause at any moment, do a check-in? Maybe you
yeah.
do need to go to that thing,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah. Good choice. Mm-hmm.
So there's something about that ability to be intentional with the speed, but
Mm-hmm.
not in a survival based way. And I think that's where, when you were talking about those that are afraid of losing their edge, their creativity, their uniqueness,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um,
Yeah.
man, it's still there when you have regulation and it's sustainable.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I think about people say all the time, like, well, Albert Einstein couldn't tie his shoes or whatever. And I'm like, but if he had become regulated, do we think that he wouldn't then be smart? Like he would still he would still have been smart, right? Or I don't know, these artists that can
Uh,
create these amazing things. I don't know, Jackson Pollock, for instance, and a lot of these artists had such dysregulation,
oh,
different,
yeah.
I don't know what their diagnoses would be now, but um the thing is like if they become regulated, right? It's like the art things might change, right? But they become more of an expression of what's happening in this here and now moment.
Yeah.
So I mean, just using art as an example, but this could be anything. I mean, certainly what I do in my work and is an expression of my creativity and
Of
my
course.
creations right now. So we could take anything
Hmm.
and apply this. It's like, you know, my art when I was doing hair and I was medicated, that tells a story of my life, an important one.
Yeah.
Now in this phase, in my healing phase, where it was really hard, whatever I was producing, I created two babies. Okay, huge,
Yeah.
right? But if it's let's say it's a painting, right? How the projection of how or the expression of the different phases of somebody's life and different phases of somebody's healing process that can be
Mhm.
seen in these phases of life in artwork, right? So it's like, yes, it might change a bit with regulation, but that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. And I think that really at the root of this is like people are scared to change. They're scared that they're going to lose that edge. They're scared that they're going to lose this part of them that can that can be wild and crazy and do this thing. And it's like, no, man, that thing might change and it might be better. It
Yeah.
likely will be better. And your
Yeah.
ability to sustain it is also going to be improved and better. Right. So I think that I thought about that last night and I was like, God, that's such a great, I think it's a great way to speak to those people that are scared of this change. It's like, man, embrace it. Like, what are we here for? Right? If it's not to change these
And that
parts.
change, when you haven't shifted out, and I'm not saying people haven't, but oh, it's so hard to convey the length of time. And I don't say this to scare people, but the
Right.
length of time and the layers and the layers,
Mm,
and oh my God, the layers
mm,
that one moves through when they really accept the mission, if you will,
that's right.
to get fully regulated in our current dysregulated world
Hmm.
is a huge mission. It's like going beyond our galaxy, um,
Absolutely. Yeah.
because we're in a because and we get this a lot, and you might get this from your clients and such. But this, oh, but the world is so dangerous. Oh, but everything is against parents. Oh, but the patriarchy is against us. Oh, but it's like,
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, it sucks. It really sucks. It does suck that you have this awareness and now you've got to give your kid to a school system that isn't going to let them be free and move.
Hmm.
And there's choices that we have to make, but
Yeah.
the path to this more regulated level, we haven't really experienced that globally. Well, no, of course we haven't. We haven't experienced that.
Definitely not. Yeah. Just a
But when I
little bit.
think, yeah, exactly. But what I want to say, and this isn't to put you on the spot, but I'm gonna, because you're on the spot.
Okay.
If
That's
people
all
go
right.
back and watch our first interview, which was just 2 years ago,
Yeah.
your regulation is like night and day.
Really. Oh, thank you.
And
Yay.
it's and it
Feels
doesn't
like
mean,
it.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, and it doesn't mean we didn't have a great conversation because we did.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's different. And then I also know, that is rippling to how you are with your kids and how you are with your clients and your ex and the other people you were with. And that just is like that
Mm.
that persistence to continue will eventually outweigh the fear of all the change and the fear of not having that creativity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If we nudge in these little bits, like we've been talking about, at these foundations, I mean, because really I come back to the foundations of this, what you've taught me, right? What I learned in SBSM over and over and over again just in my life, and really, boom, all of a sudden, this changed, and now I can have a conversation with this person when I couldn't before, and now I'm able to understand a TV show that I couldn't before. And, you know, we just plug away in these little bits. And the thing is we cannot be afraid of not knowing what's on the other side of that. We just have to take that step forward, one foot in front of the other, and sometimes just surrender and know that like this is gonna lead me somewhere, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing we're going to lose, right? But the potential to gain is extraordinary,
Yeah.
right? And really, we gain our life, right? We get our life back. Like, I got
Hmm.
my life back, right? I
Hmm.
got a relationship with my children again,
Hmm.
that I, I had a relationship. It wasn't necessarily a healthy one in those early years. I have a great relationship with my father. Couldn't ever have imagined that would
Wow.
happen because we're very different. And
Yeah,
a
yeah,
great relationship with my kid's father, right? And I've
yeah,
talked about this.
yeah.
And an ability to handle conflict, you know? And really, with that spacey, airheady, my dad was just telling me this on spring break, how emotional I was, and I just listened to him and I was observing. I was like, okay, but he was saying, I mean, it was kind of a little bit of a backhanded compliment, I think, but just the emotional swings, and really, if I were growing up in today's world,
Yeah.
I mean, certainly neurodivergent, potentially spectrum, certainly ADD,
Me too.
um,
Mm-hmm.
definitely bipolar. Like I
Mm-hmm.
really would have had a plethora, of diagnoses back then. And, those were not me. Those things were not me. Everyone thought I was spacey. They thought I was emotional. They thought I was, you know, whatever, all these things, not smart, right? And here we are in my regulated state. I'm none of those things.
No.
And no one who knows me now would ever say that, you know? And that's the potential that we have, you know? And it's really by like, I always say this, the somatic work, man. It's like your best friend and your biggest enemy because it's like the littlest thing and the hardest thing, the
Yeah.
easiest thing and the hardest thing, right?
Yeah.
The thing you want to embrace and you know you need to do, but the thing you resist the most, right? And that's because it's going to make you change.
Mm-hmm.
And then every time we are ready to change and evolve into the next thing, the next layer of ourselves, we're faced with everything, all the fear,
Mm-hmm.
all the
Mm-hmm.
things,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So yeah, going back to those like steps forward, baby steps forward, just each day, you know. So yeah.
Keep going.
I have no choice. Now I'm here
And
doing it.
yeah,
Yeah.
I want to put a little piece into, because I know in the past when I've questioned these terms,
Mm-hmm.
there have been students who have been very mad, very angry,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's okay.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
We had one of our SED peers, Bernadette, and she had said this on
I
camera,
love
so I'm gonna say
Bernadette. Love
she's
her.
like, I really hated you, Irene. Like she literally said it. And it was so great. And I'll have to make a note to put that clip in somewhere near this video. But
Yeah.
and the thing is that is okay. I,
Exactly.
it's okay that you
Yeah.
want to strangle my neck and you do not like the fact that I've just put as the Aussies would say, a spanner in the spokes. I've just made the wheel not turn. But the thing
That's
is
right.
my job isn't to just make friends with everybody. It's to help people get
Yeah.
out of these dysregulated states so that we can all find that wholeness and evolve, because our systems, not just individually but collectively, are not going to continue for good
Yeah.
if we are hiding
That's right.
ourselves.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that if yes, if you need to take insulin or something, like if you need a certain
Sure.
thing, that,
Absolutely.
yes, definitely. If you need to get something fixed, bro, like, yes. And then again, the reason I wanted to talk to you, and I've spoken to some of your other peers, Rachel, we just released one today about her journey with addiction.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and she's sober and helping others in drug rehab with this work. It's like there are these stories of what you went through, with my
Mm-hmm.
up and down, and then finally
Mm-hmm.
it was just like lift off,
Exactly. That's right.
right?
Yep.
Um, so don't worry if you feel people watching that you're like ready to unfollow and get
That's
like,
right.
that's fine. Everyone can
Yeah.
do what they want to do. But this is, I think, such a precious story because it is a story of so many. And it's the
Mm-hmm.
story that many are going through right now as little people or parents who have little
That's right.
people. And they
Yeah.
don't know what to do with all of these diagnoses and medications. And do I go this route? It's like it comes back to regulation.
Exactly. Parents'
And working,
regulation for the little
yeah,
ones. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So tell people what you do. I know what you
Yeah.
do, and you're about to do some more learning with me, but what is your business? What do you offer? All that stuff.
Yeah. I'm a somatic coach, so I see people one on one. I teach the basics, as I've learned from you, of these somatic and nervous system practices,
Mhm.
and I coach with lifestyle. A lot of lifestyle stuff, and a lot of I would say a big part of my magic in those coaching sessions is helping people with the titrating the resourcing and the capacity piece.
Great.
If you guys don't know what those terms are, you can, find Irene's videos on those. And so those are a big part of those sessions. And I'm weaving in a lot of intuitive development now into my work. So the felt senses, using the felt senses as a means to help us intuitively, right? To help us in direction in our life, and to help us discern fear from intuition. Because I feel like people get really stuck in that, like the loops, the mental loops of worry and rumination and things. And then I do have quantum healing sessions. I'm a master energy healer, so I do some psychic work in those sessions. And everything that I do is very body focused now. So even in those quantum sessions, I'm kind of feeling and sensing where there's blocks, where there's stagnancy in the energy field, and clearing those things. And again, working intuitively with spirit guides and ancestors. And just helping to guide and facilitate somebody's healing journey. So those are the two things that I do. And you can find me on Instagram at somatic_intuitive. And
Cool.
yeah, that's it.
Gotta follow those ancestors. They know.
That's right. They really
They've
do.
been here, done that.
They really do. Yeah,
Yeah.
I know. My mom's in my mom and my grandmother, and I talk about that in my stories a lot. My grandmother's always with me. Yeah,
That's
she's
lovely.
always guiding me. Yeah, for sure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. This was awesome.
Yeah.
Great talk.
We'll talk again.
Yeah, for sure.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.